walk me through your thoughts on scaling back automation to drive success, specifically for SDRs? Like, what should new SDRs be given access to from a tech stack standpoint so they can focus on getting their job done? Is there too much you can give to an SDR from a tech standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think automation is generally a good thing. Like, you need some degree of automation and speed, and you also need, quality, and you also want to set the stage for reps to be able to think for themselves and be really creative. I don't know if it's so much like the access to the automation tools are causing reps to be less strategic. I think that managers sometimes become too focused on that and then don't provide the training that the rep needs so that they can think about the deal critically and how to break in. My feeling is like, cadence tools are very valuable. Like, you want to have a general playbook that helps the rep understand what to do next. But I think it's also important to encourage and provide a decent amount of freedom for the rep, for them to think about like, okay, I want to get to this person within a company, and I might be running these playbooks for these individual people, but ultimately I need to think holistically of like, how do I tie that together and get the right message in front of the right person? I think that where it goes wrong sometimes is the rep effectively turns their brain off. They're thinking about the account, not from an account-based perspective, but on sort of a prospect by prospect basis. And I think that's where less results come from. But I think one of the great things about automation, especially having more live conversations, is even if you're not booking a meeting, you're gathering intel on that account. An example I'll use is at my previous company, I had broken into AIG. And originally I had a discover org, kind of the processor, to Zoom info, a list of something like 500 or 600 different IT contacts. And I had no idea who would be the person that would ultimately lead the initiative to purchase our product. So I started calling, I was using a degree of automation. I started talking to people, I started getting an understanding of what was happening in that company. And ultimately that led me to a cell phone number and a name of a person that might be interested. And then I was able to use that automation to get to that one strategic touch point, to get a hold of the right person, understanding the context within the organization, and then starting the sales campaign from there, leading to them eventually buying. So I really don't think it's like an either or. I think it's about mixing the two together, but all the while the rep thinking strategically about how do I break in, how do I get to the right person, how do I get that right message. But I think automation can help you do that if it's done in the right way.
So from a manager slash organizational leader standpoint, our last conversation we talked about some of the traits you look for in sellers who maybe don't have a lot of experience actually selling, but you kind of find a spark, or how they tell their story in a way that leads you to believe they can do this. And so thinking about that from a leadership standpoint, what are tactically, what are some things that leaders can do to help their sellers who are new actually understand, like, this is how you break into account, this is the things you should be focusing on? Like, what are some of those tactics that leaders can implement with their new sellers?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you're a manager, particularly a frontline manager, you should be doing some of the job yourself. And that's easier if you've been in that exact SDR role at that company and were promoted internally. But regardless, even if you're coming in as a more experienced manager, doing some of the work yourself will help inform the type of advice that you should be giving to your SDRs, because every sale is different, every company is a little bit different. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is allowing for a certain amount of intellectual freedom, because if you're hiring really good reps, they're going to surprise you. They're going to come up with things that you don't know and that you don't understand. And if you box them in too much with too much automation, and where it's like, hey, this is the message that you send out on the second touch, nothing else but what I've laid out for you. Or in the case of calling or live conversation, saying this is a script and you need to adhere to this script exactly. So much has to do with the territory you're calling into, the personality of the rep, the type of tone you use. I've had reps where they're calling into Kansas and they're opening up the call talking about sports, and it's just like a much more casual. And if you're calling into Boston or New York, I think one of our reps famously would say, hey, can you give me 30 seconds to tell you why I'm calling, or else you can throw your phone out the window. And it's kind of this cheeky New York vibe. So every rep is going to have something different that that works for them. And I think working with the rep, you want to give them guidance, you want to give them an idea of like what's not going to work and some of the things that have worked for you. But I think like giving them all the automation tools that they need when they want to speed things up, but then giving them the intellectual freedom to try different things. And sometimes that does mean slowing down, and sometimes that means going off script a little bit to be successful.